Hey, I'm Serenity and this is my channel, and today we are joined by Nebula, Nova, and back there is Holland. If you're wondering, yes, we are in a new location. I moved houses, and in about 6 weeks I'll move again, so don't get too used to the space. So today I have another Charlatans and Swindler video, which is one that I'm probably the most nervous about in this whole series, and I think this is number 6 or 7 in this series, so that's kind of scary. Today I will be mainly talking about Elvis Presley, not Elvis as the con man. He's pretty much the victim in the story. Instead, I'll be talking about his manager, but it is pretty nerve-wracking putting out a video like this because it's like if you were talking about Harry Styles or Taylor Swift and you said something bad about them, their fandom would come at you, and that's scary because that's not my intention at all with this video. In fact, like I said, he's pretty much the victim in this story in both the film we're talking about today and the real life story. There's only 2 things that I will be talking about in the later portion of this video that if you can't handle what I'm gonna say, I would just click out of this video. And those 2 things, which are facts, okay, they're proven by multiple sources. It's that 1, Elvis was technically what we would assume in today's day and age a groomer because of his wife's age when they met, and 2, that he stole art from black people, black musicians in specific, which are proven facts. If you can't deal with that and hearing your favorite in a bad light in that sense, I would click out of this video. Again, I'm not making any of this up. All my sources are linked down below, including interviews with these people and their families. But other than that, those are the 2 things. Everything else pretty much paints him in a victim light, I would say, as the innocent party. What is Charlatans and Swindlers? So basically it is a series here on my channel where in about November of 2021, I noticed a lot of Hollywood studios were producing TV shows and movies for streaming services based on true life crimes, and then I would watch them, and that's not exactly how the crime went down. So I decided, as someone who is an avid lover of true crime, that I would watch these series in sort of like a commentary summary portion, and then I tell you the real story. So we're gonna start today with the Elvis film, and then at the end, after that, we're gonna go into the real life story. Some notable examples about this is Pam and Tommy, Anna Delvey, The Tinder Swindler, all of those, which I all have videos on if you want to check them out. This one is really different because I didn't plan on making this video, and I actually moved my schedule around to fit this one in. But today, like I said, we're talking about Elvis, and let's get into it. So before we start on the movie, 1, my iPad is right here with my script. If you don't, I will be looking off to the side. I'm trying to figure out another setup to where I don't have to look off to the side, trying to find a teleprompter or something, but it's right there, and if I did not read the script, I would not remember like half of these things. I have a short-term memory. 2, that's the puppies in the background if you hear them. So we all know what Elvis looks like, but for the movie portion, I'm actually going to be putting up the actors in costume like they looked in the movie, and then when we get to the real life portion, you will see their real pictures so you can compare them along the way. Lastly, I will be using the word black to describe people of African American descent. It's just the umbrella term. That's what they use in the movie, and they use some not nice words in my opinion to describe people of color in that category. But since I don't know the origin of every single black person in the movie, I'm just going to use it as an umbrella term. Alright, let's get into it. So if you've never heard the story of Elvis or anything like that, I do want to talk about that there is death in the story and drug abuse. If that's something that's going to affect you, I would click off now. It is towards the end of both stories, but it is very prevalent. The film begins with a psychedelic opening scene in 1997. An IV drip line turns into the Las Vegas Strip skyline, where we meet the narrator and con man of the story, Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks. After fainting in his memorabilia-filled Vegas office close to death, Parker wakes up in a hospital room alone with newspapers surrounding him with the headline labeling the Colonial as a crook, a cheat, and someone who took advantage of his star, Elvis Presley. He needs to set the record straight that at all is not true. So remember that the whole film is based on Parker's point of view. The whole thing we're watching is from his perspective. Colonial Tom Parker, who is only referred to in this film as Colonial, which is what I will be using, and can't say it very well, so if I start starts saying something else, I'm sorry. He off the bat paints himself as not the reason for his biggest star's downfall, but rather how they were a pair. They needed each other, and he would do anything for his boy, as he puts it. Elvis was Santa Claus and the Colonel was the snowman. They needed each other and you couldn't have one without the other. The story begins at the very beginning of Elvis Presley's career. We quickly learn the basis of this movie. What drove the Colonel to defraud his star was simple. It wasn't jealousy, but rather the clutches of the 1950s capitalism and racism that creates a potent mixture when mixed together. It's less of a movie BIPOC, but rather a story of greed being told to a Hollywood extravaganza style film. Tom Parker begins the tale in the mid-1950s when he himself is a proclaimed undocumented Dutch immigrant who's working at a traveling carnival for a country musician named Hank Snow. Hank's teenage son, Jimmy Rogers, which yes, Hank Snow's stage name because they don't have the same last name, runs out from his truck at the carnival site with a new vinyl to play on the record player. He plays the record that has a country-like sound to it, and the carnival workers and performers enjoy the song, while Hank and Parker both believe the music is remarkable because it sounds like music that would be played by African-American folk. Jimmy then informs them that the song he's playing is actually being sung by a white young man and is super popular at the moment. The song is being played non-stop on the radio, and teens all over the country are really into this new artist. The Colonial suddenly becomes very interested in the artist. Parker then meets, or more like tracks down, and stalks the artist at one of Hank's upcoming shows for an auditorium radio performance where the boy named Elvis Presley will be opening up for Hank Snow. Parker follows Elvis out to the back of the venue where he stalks him from overhead stairs as he overhears how Elvis is nervous about getting up on stage to perform. Elvis is encouraged by his mom named Gladys to go up on stage, saying someone named Jesse is watching over them. Through Parker's narration, we learn that Jesse was Elvis's twin brother who died at birth. We also learn that Elvis's dad, named Vernon, I'm horrible with names, is in jail due to his own shady dealings. Due to this, Elvis would lose himself in DC comic books pretending that he was a superhero who would free his father from prison. His favorite superhero was named Shazam, who back in that time was known as Captain Marvel. It's a whole legal thing with the name, but anyways, he saw a lot of himself in his favorite hero. As a kid, Elvis befriended black kids due to his family being low income and could only afford living in a segregated colored housing section of the city. Through so, he found himself spiritually enhanced by soulful church black music. Now, as a teenager in the early 1950s, Elvis worked at Sun Records, a black music label, in order to make music and help support his family. During the performance, the audience anticipation to watch Elvis perform to see what he's got. Many men in the crowd mock him for his unruly hair and pink suit, but as soon as he starts singing, the women in the crowd are mystically charmed by his singing voice and gyrating hips. Now, while the young women are enchanted by Elvis, the older crowd is put off considering him to be indecent. Hank offers Elvis a spot on his tour across the South, which he takes, and Parker follows them both in an attempt to win over Elvis as his possible manager. It's obvious that at every show that Elvis is drawing continuous hordes of female admirers, but Hank quickly gets jealous over his opener's popularity and views him as being inappropriate for the crowd Hank Snow is trying to attract to his shows. So they have two different audiences, you would say. After performing at a night carnival, the Colonial corners Elvis in a house of mirrors, forcing him to ride the Ferris wheel so they can talk in private. Parker tells the young teen that Hank is about to fire him, but Parker assures Elvis with his management he will be taking his career to a new level. Elvis, who is tunnel visioned by his desire to help his family, agrees to Colonial Tom Parker becoming his manager. The pair convinces Elvis's parents, Gladys and Vernon, to join in on the venture. Vernon takes the position as manager of the newly founded Presley Enterprises. Elvis's mother, Gladys, is uncertain of her son entering a career in music, but he convinces her that he can make a name for himself. Before he toured with Hank Snow, Elvis was working as a truck driver, but remains enamored by Beale Street black performers in Memphis, Tennessee, such as B.B. King and Big Mama Thornton, who is the original singer of Hound Dog, which Elvis loves the sound of so much, and down the line takes the song from her, making it his first big major hit. When Sun Records hears about Elvis's possible big break, they encourage their employee to take. Quickly, Elvis's popularity rises and his career skyrockets. With the help of Parker, Elvis is able to move his parents into a mansion in Graceland, which he bought for them along with the Cadillac cars he promised them earlier in the film. Parker develops Elvis-themed merchandise, which includes "I Hate Elvis" pins, because he believes that even hate for his young star can make money for them. Kind of genius. However, bumpy roads are hits. Even though Elvis is insanely popular and successful, the sexual nature of Elvis's dance moves and the way he can captivate female audiences begins to put concern on parents and elected officials, who named the star Elvis the Pelvis, which pretty clever. Senator James Eastland from the Democratic Party of Mississippi rallies against Elvis and Parker, demanding Elvis becomes more PG or be forced to go to jail for his actions. Elvis is forced to wear more conservative clothing, along with his music being toned down to more mellow music, disappointing his fans and angering Elvis for being forced to be held back from his creative drive. This creates a strain between Gladys, his mom, and him, which later leads to his mother turning to alcoholism to cope with the stress. Elvis, over everything that's happening, drives to Beale Street in his pink Cadillac and hangs out with his friends, B.B. King and other black folk, while they watch an artist named Little Richard perform. This is where the Doja Cat song Vegas comes into play, which I have to say was really oddly placed into the film. It was cool, but I don't think it deserved to be at that moment. BB and Elvis step outside to talk, where BB lays it out straight for his friend. There are way too many people profiting off of Elvis right now, for officers to even attempt to put him in jail because he's a procreative performer. He encourages his friend to do whatever he wants to do. Elvis arrives at his next concert after his talk with B.B. King, where he is ordered not to so much as wiggle a single finger or he will be arrested. The crowd is separated into a colored section, which is placed in the back and off to the side of the stage, and a white section with seats and placed center stage. As Elvis steps on the stage, he remembers BB's advice and directly addresses the audience, saying nobody's gonna change him, while the crowd goes wild. He performs the song Trouble, as the ladies in the crowd go wild as he wiggles his hips across the city. The politician I mentioned earlier is hosting a rally that has Confederate flags in the background, claiming how Elvis must be stopped and he is ruining the American youth. Parker, horrified by his client, forces security to pull Elvis off stage, where he is then put in a car, separated from his family, and banned and driven away. In 1958, Elvis is threatened that he will be going to jail for public indecency, but is given an option to serve overseas in Germany with the rise of World War II happening. Elvis accepts after Parker tells him it will help clean up his image, and after his 2 years are served, he can come back and get his career back, and go back to gyrating his hips and being raunchy. Elvis's preparation for the departure is televised of his long, unruly hair being cut into a military-style cut, along with him in his uniform being shipped off to the war. Gladys fears her son's safety and dies from alcoholism while her son is away. Elvis flies home from the war, where reporters are waiting outside their Graceland home after Gladys' funeral, awaiting a statement from the star. Vernon and Elvis are too heartbroken to face any reporters, and the star is hiding in his mother's closet crying into her hung-up clothes. Parker enters the room and convinces Elvis to go outside with his father and make a statement for the sake of Gladys' honor. Everything she has sacrificed for him would be for nothing if he doesn't. They do it, and it becomes front-page news. By 1959, Elvis is still serving in the military in Germany, where he meets his future wife, Priscilla, who is the daughter of a high-ranking army pilot. Elvis enjoys spending his private time with the girl as he begins to fall in love with her. In the 1960s, Elvis finally returns to the United States after serving his time in the military. He begins to make his comeback in films, starting with Love Me Tender. Colonel notes that people only want to watch Elvis sing, so he keeps getting Elvis singing roles in more films. I don't know if that's a testament to how bad Elvis's acting may have been, or maybe people just wanted to see their favorite singer, not actor. Elvis and Priscilla get married in Las Vegas, Nevada, and soon have a daughter named Lisa Marie. Elvis soon creates his own entourage that follows him everywhere, which includes his wife, Priscilla, his friend Jerry Shingling, and many others, which they garnered the nickname the Memphis Mafia. During his time on a movie set, the crew gets the news about the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Parker tells Elvis that this news has nothing to do with them. However, Elvis believes the assassination has everything to do with them. Elvis is soon introduced to a man named Steve Binder by his friend Jerry. Steve reveals that he wants to help Elvis advance his line of work. The Colonel books Elvis an NBC Christmas special, where the producers are expecting him to do a clean show and sing Here Comes Santa Claus. This whole 5-10 minute scene portion of the movie where it is about the Christmas special is probably the most hilarious part of the movie. Tom Hanks' character keeps trying to push Elvis into the sweater and sing Here Comes Santa Claus, and it's this whole freaking spiel, and I think it's like a highlight of the film. But after plotting behind Parker's back, Elvis performed his biggest hits such as Heartbreak Hotel and Jailhouse Rock with elaborate background sets. At some point during a performance break, the crew learns about the assassination of Robert Kennedy, which also deeply affects Elvis. Parker breaks up the crying session around the TV while ordering Elvis to do a Christmas song because the producers will not pay him if he does not do so, otherwise along with Parker threatening to drop Elvis as a client. The following evening, while recording the special, Elvis performs a new original song named If I Can Dream, which becomes a massive hit as a protest song. Elvis, who is believed at this point to have been dropped by Parker as a client, is in a meeting at the Graceland mansion with Steve Binder about buying a private jet that he plans to name the Lisa Marie, after his own daughter. Steve also talks to Elvis about how they have been receiving inquiries from overseas countries for Elvis to perform. They would be paying him about $1 million a night. Back in 1960s money, that's well over $1 million now. Elvis agrees, but then trouble hits when Parker falls ill while in Vegas. Elvis flies in after being told by everyone around him that he doesn't need to be there to support him, but rather to just get in and out ASAP so he can continue his booming career and new adventures. Parker brings Elvis to the Las Vegas International Hotel, where the owners of the new hotel are interested in having Elvis become the headline performer in the soon opening hotel venue in the state-of-the-art theater. Elvis agrees because International Hotel agrees to pay for absolutely everything, along with a large salary and anything and everything he wants for his show, while paying the crew a decent wage. The show opens, and while that show is happening, Parker is negotiating payment for the star, which is odd because Parker is no longer Elvis's manager, as far as we can tell at this point, but is parading around like he is, and basically pimping the star out for his own gain. After scoring a huge payment for Elvis of $1 million a year for 5 years, which is insane because Elvis was about to make $1 million from one overseas performance, but is now trapped into this contract that is basically making him no money in comparison of what he would have made. It's $1 million a year. It's a lot of money, but it's not what he could have been earning. It was then revealed why exactly the Colonel brought Elvis to the International Hotel, roping him into an essentially a scam because Parker is severely in debt to the International Hotel from his gambling, and by signing his client to a deal, he would get his debts erased by the hotel. So as long as Parker has Elvis performing at the Vegas hotel, all of his debts would be wiped clean and have an endless line of credit to spend at the hotel to gamble and live in the building, all for free on the back of his star Elvis. However, Elvis wants to start traveling the world to perform, internationally that is. But Parker refuses to let him do so because hiddenly Parker is an undocumented man, so he would not be able to join Elvis on the tour, which would leave him out of the paycheck, along with him not being able to control the star's actions overseas. We learn earlier in the movie, back when Elvis was threatened early in his career about being jailed, that the senator that I mentioned earlier, who had a vendetta against the star named Jim Eastland, interrogated Colonel Tom Parker about his star, which in a nutshell just threatened that if Elvis didn't join the military or go to jail, then Eastland would air out the dirty laundry of Parker's, which is that he was not even a colonel. His real name isn't even Tom Parker. He's an undocumented snake oil salesman from the Netherlands who is running around as a jaded businessman, which is insane because that is the reason that Parker forced Elvis to join the military. His true colors and fraudulent ways are showing. So during his residency at the hotel, Priscilla watches her husband kiss other women while on stage, essentially watching her husband cheat on her every night in front of her own eyes. And soon he starts sleeping with groupies every night. Much to her knowledge, she knows it's going on. Elvis actually lives in the hotel during this time and would go back to Graceland whenever he had a break. Now, Parker orders tighter security on Elvis after he continually receives death threats, as well as crazy fans rushing him on stage. This point is hammered into why Elvis should not tour internationally because there is not enough security to keep him safe, unlike what Parker would be able to provide him at the hotel in the United States. Elvis is done with the Colonel's crap and cuts ties with Parker, only to be sued by him later on for everything he has ever paid for, totaling over $8 million at the time. Now, this is where it gets crazy and makes no sense, because Parker receives half of every paycheck that Elvis makes, meaning he is doing 100% of the work while only getting paid 50%. And tells his son how much he owes Parker in restitutions and the record label for his numerous expenses. Elvis angrily confronts Parker as he is leaving the hotel after moving out. Elvis sadly has no choice but to keep Parker on or be forever indebted to him. The stress from performing and dealing with Parker drives Elvis to a pill addiction and alcoholism, making him grow paranoid. He buys dozens of guns and keeps them in his hotel penthouse after signing another year's contract with the International Hotel. Parker goes as far as hiring a personal doctor to keep Elvis drugged up like a horse, making sure that above all else, Elvis is able to perform every single night. During one of his shows, high on injected drugs after passing out from exhaustion earlier that day, Elvis calls out Parker in a crowd publicly as someone who is keeping him caged up in the hotel like a circus animal. Elvis walks off stage after an early curtain drop, and Priscilla ends up divorcing him after this due to his addiction. Not the infidelity that she knows about, but rather him being an absentee dad to their daughter Lisa Marie and not really being in her life. She tells him that he needs to get his act together for their child if he wants to be a healthy staple in the little girl's life. By the mid-1970s, Elvis, nearing 40 years old, has started gaining a grueling amount of weight, and his health is in a serious decline from the constant use of opioids. While on an airplane runway with Priscilla and Lisa Marie before he has to leave them again, Priscilla asks Elvis to go to a rehab clinic she heard about for their daughter's sake. Elvis denies, and Priscilla tearfully leaves him to board the plane away from his small family. In 1977, Elvis passes away at the age of 42 from a heart attack. Fans all around the world are saddened by the news and pay tribute to the late star. President Jimmy Carter gives a statement about Elvis Presley, memorializing him. In the closing narration, Colonel Tom Parker states he does not believe it was the pills, alcohol, or even him, the manager, that killed Elvis, but rather the love he received from the fans, whatever that means. Elvis's last performance is shown him being obese, worn out, sweaty, but still managing to belt out the song Unchained Melody to a still adoring crowd, despite being called the wash-up residency performer of Las Vegas, Nevada. And that's where we get this lovely meme of Austin Butler in concert. If you've seen this anywhere on Twitter, it's hilarious. But that's from this closing scene. In 1997, Parker dies in the hospital, and the film concludes with text on the screen stating the following. Colonel Tom Parker's abuse of Elvis Presley was made known after a series of lawsuits filed after Presley's death. Although Parker tried to defend himself and even claimed a citizen of no man's land, he wound up spending the rest of his years in disgrace, pouring what little money he had left into Vegas casino slot machines. Meanwhile, Elvis Presley, and this is shocking, don't know why, but it is still the highest selling solo artist of all time, and his influence and legacy of music continues to live on to this day. So that was the brief summary. Now we're gonna get into behind the scenes of the movie, what was not true, what is true, and the real story. Let's start with what happened behind the scenes while filming this movie and the overall preface of the movie. I really appreciate the pacing of the film while also using historic events in American history for the audience to understand how many decades and years and all that the story spans across to show what part we are at in the story. It was really good, but I think they actually made Elvis like really woke, and I don't know if he was that woke. Before we go any further, I actually want to talk about the actor who played Elvis Presley, Austin Butler, and his ex-girlfriend, Vanessa Hudgens. Literally manifested this role for him, and I'll be playing that clip right now.
Christmas song came on, and I was looking at him and he was singing along, and I was like, babe, you need to play Elvis. I don't know how, but we need to figure out how you can play Elvis. I'm so excited that this is happening.
Now, Austin also completely lost his self-identity over the 18 months of filming this movie. To this day, he still talks with some sort of mannerisms he's learned while studying Elvis. He did such an amazing job at the role that he received a 12-minute standing ovation at the Cannes Film Festival, where the film first premiered to the world in May of 2022. I'm going to include some clips now of how well Butler mirrored Elvis's original performance because it is really uncanny. At the beginning of the film, Austin Butler's voice is 100% singing the songs, but as the film progresses, Butler's voice is mixed with Elvis's original recordings to mend better and have the classic Elvis sound. And the final song in the film is completely used to close out the film is 100% Elvis, which you can tell. When it comes to his performance of the King of Rock and Roll, Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife, was at the premiere along with the Met Gala with Butler, mentioning that seeing his performance of the love of her life brought good, happy tears to her eyes, bringing forward many memories. Now, I'm sure you heard the title track of the film, Vegas by Doja Cat, and I want to talk about the very meaningful symbolism of the song. Here's where Elvis fans might get mad at me. Essentially, Elvis stole the song from a black artist named Big Mama Thornton. Hound Dog, he profited off of it beyond measure, and it is literally his whole brand. He had plushed Hound Dog merchandise. Doja Cat, a black woman, used Thornton's version of Hound Dog rather than Elvis's, and wrote lyrics that seemed to be calling out Elvis Presley and his behavior, especially with the line, "I'm losing my patience, this ain't staying in Vegas, there's more sides to the story. I'm going to tell everybody. Finally, an interesting fact, nearly 24 actors have played Elvis Presley on TV and in movies since 1979. Onto the preface of the film. It was told from Colonel Parker's perspective, so as an audience, the way certain characters in the movie fell flat or were used as background characters to the main story was technically on purpose. Parker was a racist, so the black people in this film faded into the background. Colonel also had a huge disdain towards Priscilla for stealing his boy, so she falls flat as a person in the film and feels cardboard-like. Lastly, Parker never tarnished Elvis in both his image and brand because he feels a level of enmeshment towards the star. He sees him as himself, like they could not exist without one another. A big point critics felt that was left out of the film was how invested Elvis was in collecting and trading watches. It was a huge part of his life, and in a way, he measured it with his growing wealth. However, it was not mentioned once in the film and is a surprising fact to learn. When it comes to the big screen of Colonel Parker, two major things were changed about him as a character to the real-life myth. One thing is, in the film it was portrayed that Parker wanted Elvis to tone down his more risky performances and antics. But Parker loved Elvis's male-like striptease act because it sold more tickets and made him more money. The second thing I mentioned in the movie portion is that Elvis's performance were viewed as so controversial by the government that he was sent to the army to avoid jail time, but this was a total lie in regards to the actions on Parker's part of toning down his artists. In fact, the government never forced Elvis to join the army in order to avoid being jailed for indecency, but rather it was just a PR stunt orchestrated by Parker. Now onto what isn't true in the real life story in comparison to the film. So in the film, it is portrayed that Elvis was only inspired by the black artists in Memphis, only however that's not entirely true. He had many white influences, and in the 7th grade, he announced he was one day going to sing at the Grand Ole Prairie. He entered as a child a talent contest singing Old Chef, which is a song about deceased dogs, and that's just really super country. Another inaccuracy is that Presley fires Parker while on stage in Las Vegas, but that never happened. In the film, it is shown that Elvis has a close friendship with B.B. King. However, there's a large doubt in real life the two were ever even friends. At most, acquaintances, but most likely the two artists who first crossed paths at the Sun studio briefly. Nothing more. In real life, there's not much evidence that there was a connection between Parker's gambling debts and Elvis's Las Vegas residency, which was pretty clear-cut in the movie. Elvis is actually the person who started Las Vegas residencies, as far as I can tell with my research, so you can thank him for the big artist residencies now today in Vegas. The film also only focuses on one romantic relationship in Elvis's life with his wife Priscilla, while slightly glossing over his teenage relationships with a young girl right before his career starts taking off. In real life, Elvis had two later in life partners, Ginger Allen and Linda Thompson, both of which are left out of the film completely. In the film, it is shown that Priscilla asked Elvis after his next concert to check into a rehab for their daughter, but he passes away before that's possible. This never really happened. Elvis would occasionally check into a hospital, and then she would hear it through the grapevine and then call the hospital to check in on him. Also, the movie shows this very moving scene where Robert Kennedy is shot dead during the taping of Elvis's TV special, and he feels the immense need to write a song and be the voice of hope for his generation. That's not at all how it went down. The senator was shot in Los Angeles, California, and not during the recording of the special, but rather during the 2 weeks of rehearsals. Rehearsals began on June 3rd, 1968, and Kennedy was shot on June 5th, 1968, passing away from his injuries the following morning on June 6th, 1968. Elvis did go into an emotional spiral, but he didn't like the song that he was supposed to perform in regards to the tragedy. It took him about 8 listens before he decided to record the Broadway-esque song. Now onto the topic that I was honestly wondering about. Elvis in the film was portrayed as a Black Lives Matter ally and friend, but in real life that might not be as true. He would basically steal songs from black artists in Memphis, Tennessee, appropriated them, and passed them off as his own, gaining large media praise for his creation of a new sound. Now a famous quote captured by the periodical Sepa back in 1975 quoted Elvis saying the following: "The only thing niggers can do me is buy my records and shine my shoes." That doesn't seem very ally-like to me. The godmother of rock and roll, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, was quoted when asked about Elvis as follows: "These kids and their rock and roll is just sped up rhythm and blues. I've been doing this forever." Before we get into the real story timeline, there is one more thing I want to mention in regards to the movie. The beginning shows Elvis praying before his performance that Parker is in the audience. But after that, the faith aspect is just dropped altogether from the film. In real life, Presley would always say a prayer before every performance, constantly reading the Bible and looking for guidance in God with everything he did. On January 8th, 1935, Elvis Aaron Presley was born to parents Vernon and Gladys Presley in a 2-bedroom home in Tupelo, Mississippi as the second born twin. Elvis was an identical identical twin to a sadly stillborn brother. From a young age, Elvis was a mama's boy with a stutter. On October 3rd, 1945, at age 10, Elvis had his first public performance in the Mississippi-Alabama Fair singing contest. He sang Red Foley's Old Shep, placing 5th. A few months later, for his 11th birthday, Presley received a $7.90 guitar from Tupelo hardware store. Now, he wanted a rifle gun, but his parents could only afford a guitar. His uncle Vester gave Elvis basic guitar lessons over the following year. In September 1948, Presley family moved to Memphis, Tennessee, allegedly due to Vernon having to escape the law from transporting bootleg liquor and him needing a new job. They lived on both 370 Washington Street and then 572 Avenue, a boarding house in which they shared a bathroom with 3 other families. After moving to Memphis, Elvis graduated from Hume's High School. By the time he graduated, he was a very popular performer at the local dance and club scene. On July 18, 1953, Presley goes to Sun Records Memphis recording services to record his first 2 songs, My Happiness and That's When Your Heartache Begins, which were rumored to be a birthday present for his mom despite being made a month after her birthday. On January 4th, 1954, Presley records another demo of the songs I'll Never Stand in Your Way and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You. During this time, Sun Records head Sam Phillips was looking for someone who could sing a blend of black blues and boogie-woogie music. He thought it would be very popular among white people, but because racism was so high at this time, the sound could not be performed by a traditional African-American performer. Sam thought if he could find a white performer who was able to sing this music, then Phillips would be able to make billions of dollars, as he predicted. On June 26, 1954, Elvis auditioned for Sam Phillips. He was extremely nervous, and though he didn't make an amazing impression, a studio session was still planned. On August 15, 1955, Colonel Tom Parker signed Elvis Presley to a 1-year contract as his manager, plus yearly renewals. Many different record labels had shown interest in signing Presley, and by the end of October of 1955, 3 major labels had made up to $25,000 in offers. On November 21, 1955, Parker and Phillips had negotiated a deal with RCA Victor Records to acquire Presley's Sun contract for $40,000. $5,000 alone was a bonus for the singer, which was back royalties owed to him by Sun Records. Odd enough to learn, at this time, Elvis was still a minor at age 20. That's what they considered a minor. So his father, Vernon, had to sign his contracts. On March 23, 1956, Elvis released his self-titled debut album. It spent 10 weeks at the #1 spot on the Billboard Top Pop Albums chart in 1956. It was the first rock and roll album ever to make the top of the charts. It was the first million-selling rock album, and in 2003, it was ranked number 55 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of 500 greatest albums of all time. Also in 1956, Elvis makes his first of 3 appearances on the television's Ed Sullivan's show, gathering the highest ratings for any TV variety show ever. On October 19, 1956, Elvis releases his second album titled Elvis. It spent 4 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Pop Album charts. Then in November of that year, his first movie, Love Me Tender, opens in theaters. In March of 1957, Presley purchases the Graceland Mansion. On October 15th of 1957, Elvis releases his Christmas album. It also spent 4 weeks at the #1 spot on the Billboard Top Pop Album chart, being one of the 2 Christmas-themed albums Elvis released in his career, the other one in the early 1970s. As of 2007, Elvis's Christmas album is the top-selling holiday album themed release of all time, with over 9 million sold copies according to the RIAA. On October 17, 1957, Elvis's film Jailhouse Rock was released in theaters. Then in March of 1958, Elvis Presley is drafted into the US Army and posted to Germany. In 1958, Elvis's mother Gladys died. It is unclear if it was from an alcohol addiction, a supposed fall down the stairs, or the diet pills she would take to make herself appear thinner in pictures taken with her son. Elvis was extremely devastated by her death and was lonely for years. 2 years later, in March of 1960, Elvis was discharged from the army, and he immediately began filming and recording for his first ever post-war movie, his 5th film, GI Blues. On April 8th of 1960, Elvis releases his 10th album titled Elvis Is Back. It was his first album to be released in true stereo and peaked at #2 on the Billboard Top Pop Albums chart. If it isn't obvious by now, Colonel Tom Parker is working Elvis Presley like a show pony. Then just 8 months later, in December of 1960, Elvis releases his first gospel album, a follow-up to his 1957 EP, Peace in the Valley, an album titled His Hand in Mine. Like I said earlier, he was a devoted Christian and was extremely fond of gospel music. Elvis's gospel recordings remain to this day the only Elvis albums to ever receive a Grammy Award. Then from June 17, 1961 to May 1976, Elvis releases his 11th album through his 52nd album. And I want to mention that all these albums were sometimes sometimes full-on albums like we know them today with 12 tracks, but also he released a lot of compilations of live songs being recorded and published a couple of extra songs from old albums and so forth. So he did make over 52 albums with 12 tracks on each album 2 to 5 times a year. They were like song releases and stuff. May of 1967, Elvis marries his girlfriend Priscilla, I hope I'm saying her last name right, O'Leo, in a private Las Vegas ceremony that only lasted 8 minutes. This is where all the Vegas Elvis impersonators come in, with people being married by him at chapels in the Sin City. And I'm pretty sure, if I read the news right, Presley Enterprises, which is Elvis's brand, has now banned Elvis impersonators in Vegas, so on copyright infringement. Now they would divorce 6 years later, but let's get into this predatory relationship. This is the second thing Elvis fans might get mad at me for talking about. Priscilla has been interviewed multiple times by multiple different news outlets, and she has talked about how difficult her marriage to the King of Rock was, along with how pressured she felt into marrying the rock star. Colonel Tom Parker had pressured Presley to marry Priscilla soon due to the PR nightmare should he eventually break up with her. The fallout from fans would have been horrible. So in December of 1966, Presley proposed and they got married a few months later. However, the proposal was very much not a romantic thing, as Elvis just one day showed Priscilla the ring and simply asked her to marry him. Although the pair was happy and content in their relationship, this was a time that it was odd for a couple who wasn't married yet to be living together. Does that make sense? Now here's where things start to get controversial. So Priscilla's father was a captain in the army. His name was Captain Joseph O'Leo. He met Elvis during his time in the army in Germany, where he and his family lived at the time. Elvis was around 23, 24 when he then met the captain's daughter, 14-year-old Priscilla. That's right, Elvis met Priscilla when she was only 14 years old. A very large 10-year age gap between the two. Now I don't have issues with age gaps unless there's a disappropriation in power. One person cannot have all the control while the other has none. That's not how it should work. Now let me explain this more clearly. At the time, 17-year-old girls were getting married. It was common practice, but Priscilla was 14, okay? When I was 14, I was in middle school. By the time I was 17, I was a senior in high school. That gap, a lot of growing up happened. So you see what I mean? It's not, that 3 years is a lot happened. I don't know, I know at the time girls were getting married young, and I don't know if age gaps these large and dating someone that much older at the time was normal. But in today's standards, that's not okay and you will be sent to jail. But what I do know is Priscilla's parents attempted to keep their child away from Presley and even attempted to intervene after the couple went on their 4th date. Captain Joseph Burlew asked Elvis once, and I quote, "Why my daughter when you have women throwing themselves at you?" Now according to Priscilla and the People magazine essay in 1978, Elvis replied to this question, and I quote, "I happen to be very fond of her. She's a lot more mature than her age, and I enjoy her company. You don't have to worry about her, Captain. I'll take care of her. She's 14. That's not mature, that's grooming." During an interview with Barbara Walters, Priscilla Presley was quoted about the relationship in the early stages with the following: "He came to the house and he was charming and wonderful. My family had a lot of faith in him." And it is shocking that the movie just watered this whole thing down, glossing over the whole aspect and the age gap of their relationship. However, Priscilla's parents were still confused and bewildered by the relationship. Priscilla was quoted in her interview saying, "We tried to make them believe that it was proper and platonic, and they wanted to believe me. Whenever they tried to stop us from seeing each other, I pleaded and cried and made them and myself miserable. In retrospect, I don't think anything could have stopped me from seeing Elvis." And it is true that Priscilla constantly tried to pursue this relationship with Elvis, but then again, she was a child. Priscilla herself was concerned about their relationship when Elvis returned in 1960 to the United States. She feared he would no longer want to be in a relationship with her, saying, and I quote, "I dreaded the day very much because I don't know, actually, if I was ever going to see him again. One request that he asked was that I not be teary-eyed. So you see me smiling here. There are other pictures where I am down, looking away and knowing that I may never see him again." So that was the beginning. They had their daughter Lisa Marie on February 1st, 1968. While in the army in the late 1950s, Presley tried to avoid drugs but was introduced to amphetamines. He thought of them only as medicine, much higher class than street drugs. He eventually began feeling this way towards many other prescription drugs he would get from his personal physician, George, not gonna say this last name right, Nikopoulos, or Dr. Nick for short, who kept the star constantly supplied with a cocktail of opioids and amphetamines he craved. According to Dr. Nick, and I quote, "Elvis's problem was that he didn't see the wrong in it. He felt that way by getting it from a doctor. He wasn't that common, everyday junkie getting something off the street. He was a person who thought that as far as medications and drugs went, there was something for everything." Now, today we know that opioids and amphetamines are highly addictive and can cause overdoses. Even Tylenol can kill you. Elvis would delve deeper into into heavy prescription drug use. His behavior became more bizarre and paranoid, and he started collecting guns, just like the film. In 1968, when his music career was waning, Elvis appeared on an NBC television special that has become widely known as his 68 comeback special. This is that NBC special, Christmas special that was shown in the movie. In 1969, Elvis returns to live performing at his residency at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. He sets large audience records. By the 1970s, Elvis had become more of a garnish dress lounge singer than the rock and roll idol he once was. It affected Elvis deeply. In 1970, Elvis's That's the Way It Is, a documentary of Elvis on tour and his 30-second film, opens in theaters. This is the time that he begins wearing the famous jumpsuit and cape outfits on stage. In 1972, Elvis and Priscilla separated as she moved out of their shared residence, and they would go on to divorce in 1973. In 1973, Elvis makes television and entertainment history with his Elvis, Aloha from Hawaii via satellite special. It was seen in about 40 countries by 1 billion to 1.5 billion people. The concert album hit #1 on the Billboard Pop Album chart, his last #1 on that chart. In the same year, Elvis is hospitalized in Memphis, Tennessee, battling health problems including an increasing dependency on prescription drugs. He is then re-hospitalized in early 1975 and in April 1977, one of which left him in a brief coma. By 1976, Presley was overweight and sweaty and suffered from glaucoma and irritable bowel syndrome caused by his drug abuse, which who doesn't have IBS? He would slur his words and songs, and his performances were sweaty disasters most of the time. On June 26, 1977, Elvis Presley gave his final performance in Indianapolis at the Market Square Arena. Unlike what the movie suggests, that his final performance was in Las Vegas at the International Hotel. According to Elvis's entourage, the Memphis Mafia claimed that this was the best show he had given in a while, with some very strong singing, which is the performance you see at the end of the film. On July 19, 1977, Elvis's last album, While He Is Alive, titled Moody Blue, is released. Another tour for Elvis was scheduled to start on August 17, 1977, but at the Graceland Mansion on August 16, 1977, Elvis was found unresponsive on his own bathroom floor by his fiancée, which they totally cut out of the film, Ginger Alden. She attempts to perform CPR on the singer, but fails. Elvis Presley was officially pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. at the Baptist Memorial Hospital that same day. Now, it is unsure what exactly caused Elvis Presley's death. His official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrhythmia, but he was found with multiple drugs in his system, including amphetamines, barbiturates, and opioids. So it's easy to understand why some think he may have overdosed. Obvious use of years of drug abuse that damaged his health and enlarged his heart. This could explain the fatal heart attack. Consequently, Dr. Nick sat on trial for the responsibility of Elvis's death as his primary doctor. He received many death threats, but in 1981, he was acquitted. Now I want to talk about Ginger Alden, Elvis's fiancée. There is limited information on her, but here's a quote I found from Priscilla Presley on their relationship. Elvis's personal life was not helping the situation. He was seeing Ginger Alden, who was 20 years his junior, and the difference in their ages was becoming more and more of a problem. There were conflicts, many. Ginger did not like touring or one-night stands. She was close to her family and didn't want to leave them. Elvis tried bringing half of her family with them on tour, but that only created other problems. She spends more time with her sister and mother than she did with me, Elvis would complain to Priscilla. Also, a lot of Elvis's friends did not particularly like Ginger, many of which were quoted calling her a gold digger. I'm not sure if any of that is true, but it does give some perspective. Also, Elvis had a thing for dating younger women, a lot younger. So here we talk about Colonel Parker again. After Presley passed away, Parker had established a licensing deal with Factors, etc. to control all of Presley's merchandise. He also worked on maintaining Presley's estate, which was estimated to cost around $500,000 a year to upkeep. In the early 1980s, an investigation was launched into Parker's management of Elvis. Attorney Blanchard E. Toole concluded that Parker's deal of taking 50% of the singer's profits was extortionate. The industry standard was only about 15 to 20%. Additionally, the attorney determined that Parker's handling of Presley's business affairs was unethical. A legal suit between Parker and the Presley's estate was settled outside of court in 1983. It is estimated that the 3 following years after Elvis's death, Parker stole upwards of $3 million from the Presley family. That is the story of Elvis Presley, his real life, and the movie. The last thing I want to talk about, even though it doesn't seem like Parker was the only one to be the demise of Elvis's career, he still was the main charlatan and swindler in the story. But a lot of people took advantage of Elvis, probably more than we'll ever know. But it's unclear to say if Parker hadn't hired Dr. Nick, if Elvis would still be alive today. He was a victim of drug abuse and exploitation in the capitalist society of Hollywood. Hollywood. Now, it is unclear if Parker was the reason that Elvis never performed internationally and rather stayed in the United States as a superstar here, which is super interesting to me because I wonder if people overseas know Elvis as much as we do in the States, if he's an icon over there. I don't know, let me know if you're watching from overseas. But yeah, Elvis never toured overseas, which is crazy to me to think about because I always thought he was this big star. Second thing before we're done, one thing the film and all my research never mentioned was the Presley sandwich. Elvis's favorite sandwich, which is a peanut butter and banana sandwich. I've never saw it anywhere, if he actually ate it, if it was just this thing made up. So let me know if that's real, if you know if that's real. I could not find that anywhere. Lastly, I want to say that the Elvis film was good, and I do think it's a film to watch because it's very, very well done, but it is not 100% accurate, just like we said, or else this video wouldn't have been made. It is a Hollywood BIPOC, simple as that. The point of view of the story being told from the con man was a really good writer's choice in my opinion. Usually in these videos, I don't suggest you go and watch the show, but this one I feel like you should watch the movie. It was really good. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you like it. If you did, like, comment, and subscribe. I realized halfway through this, I was saying Colonel as Colonial. Told you I can't say that word. It's not spelled like it's pronounced. And every time I had to say Colonel, I kept thinking Colonel Sanders from the KFC commercial, so that's what's going on here. The picture of the day is this picture of Holland because she's sleeping right there. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!